"It's time to turn the page," she said. I responded with a video that she didn't know I had.
My wife deleted all our family photos the day after our wedding anniversary. "It's time to turn the page," she said. I responded with a video that she didn't know I had. Before I share my story, I'd love for you to comment where you're watching from, so I can get to know you better. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll receive more inspiring stories like this one. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in the doorway of our home office, the anniversary gift I'd just purchased still hidden in my jacket pocket. 25 years of marriage, and I was watching my wife methodically erasing every trace of it from our digital lives. "Emma," my voice cracked slightly as I watched her click through folder after folder on our shared computer. "What are you doing?" She didn't even flinch at my voice, just continued clicking and deleting with cold precision. "Cleaning up, Richard. It was time." I stepped closer, my stomach dropping as I recognized the folders she was emptying. Hawaii, 2010. Thomas's graduation, Christmas 2018. Years of memories disappearing with each decisive click of her mouse. "Those are our family photos," I said, my voice strangely calm despite the panic rising in my chest. "All of them." "Why would you—" "It's time to turn the page," Emma interrupted, finally looking up at me. Her blue eyes, once warm and familiar, now seemed to belong to a stranger. 25 years is a nice round number to end on, don't you think? The small velvet box in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The anniversary necklace inside, a delicate silver chain with a pendant marking our years together, now seemed like a cruel joke. "End," I repeated numbly. "What are you talking about?" Emma sighed, smoothing her perfectly styled hair with manicured fingers I'd once found so elegant. Now they just looked like weapons, clicking and destroying with detached efficiency. "I've been patient, Richard. I've waited for the right time." She closed the laptop and stood up, straightening her expensive blouse. "The children are grown. The house is almost paid off. Your retirement fund is healthy. It's the perfect moment to make a clean break." My mind refused to process her words. Just yesterday we'd gone to dinner at Marcello's, the same restaurant where I'd proposed. She'd smiled across the table, clinked glasses with me, even kissed me when we returned home. Had it all been an act? "You're leaving me?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Don't look so shocked." Emma's lips curled into a smirk I'd never seen before. "Surely you must have suspected something. We haven't really been happy for years." But I hadn't suspected. Not once. Yes, we'd settled into a comfortable routine, but I'd attributed that to the natural evolution of a long marriage. I thought we were solid, dependable. I thought we were forever. "Who is he?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Emma's eyebrow arched. "Does it matter?" It did matter. Everything mattered. 25 years of my life was disappearing before my eyes, and I desperately needed to understand why. "It's David, isn't it? Your boss." The pieces suddenly fell into place. The late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to multiply over the past year, the new clothes, the subtle changes in her appearance. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Long enough," she replied, gathering her purse. "Richard, let's be adults about this. I've already spoken with my lawyer. We can make this simple. I get half of everything, including your retirement fund and the house, and we go our separate ways. No drama necessary." Half of everything. The words echoed in my mind as I stared at this stranger wearing my wife's face. Half of everything I'd worked for, saved for, planned for our future together. "You can't just erase 25 years, I said, gesturing weakly toward the computer. "I just did." She walked past me, her expensive perfume, another recent change, lingering in the air. "I'm staying at David's tonight. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow." As the front door closed behind her, I sank into the office chair, the weight of her betrayal crushing my chest. On the desk, a framed photo of our wedding day stared back at me, the only image she hadn't been able to delete. I picked it up, studying the young, hopeful faces smiling back at me. 25 years, I whispered to the empty room, finally pulling the velvet box from my pocket and placing it next to the photo. And you were planning this all along. 3 days passed in a fog of disbelief. I barely ate, hardly slept, and ignored the persistent calls from Emma's lawyer. Our home, once warm with memories, now felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Every room held echoes of the past I thought we'd shared, a past Emma had so easily discarded. I wandered aimlessly through the house on the third night, a half-empty glass of whiskey in my hand, when I found myself in front of the storage closet. Something pulled me toward the stacks of boxes inside, labeled in my neat handwriting, tax records, old manuals, memorabilia. In the far corner sat a dusty external hard drive I'd forgotten about years ago. I'd used it to back up our family videos before cloud storage became reliable, another precaution Emma had always called my pointless paranoia. Not so pointless now. With trembling hands, I connected the hard drive to my laptop. After what felt like an eternity, the familiar folder structure appeared on the screen. Years of videos, organized by date, untouched by Emma's digital purge. I clicked on a random file from 2005, Thomas's 10th birthday. The screen filled with Emma's smiling face as she carried a homemade cake toward the camera, our son's eyes wide with excitement. My throat tightened as I watched us, a happy family, a loving couple, or so I'd believed. "You were always a good actress," I whispered to Emma's image, taking another sip of whiskey. I spent hours lost in these digital ghosts, drinking and torturing myself with glimpses of a happiness that had apparently been an illusion. Near dawn, my eyes burning with exhaustion and unshed tears, I opened a folder labeled Emma's 40th, 2012. The thumbnail showed our bedroom, odd, as I didn't remember filming anything there. Curious, I clicked play. The video opened with Emma adjusting the camera, then stepping back to sit on our bed. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "Is it recording?" she asked someone off camera. A woman's voice, her sister Janet, replied, "The red light's on, so I think so." Emma nodded, then took a deep breath. "Okay, so this is my insurance policy, I guess you could call it." I frowned, leaning closer to the screen. "David and I have been seeing each other for almost a year now," Emma continued, her voice steady. "I know what I'm doing is wrong, but Richard has become so predictable. David understands me. He sees my potential." My stomach clenched as I watched my wife of 15 years at that point calmly discuss her affair with her boss. But what she said next made my blood run cold. "The plan is to wait until the time is right. Richard's career is going well, our investments are growing, and the equity in the house increases every year." Emma's face lit up with a calculating smile I'd never seen before. "David thinks we should wait another 10 years or so before I file for divorce. By then I can take Richard for everything he's worth." Janet's laughter echoed from off-camera. "You always were the smart one, but aren't you worried he'll find out about you and David?" Emma shook her head, confident. "Richard sees what he wants to see. He's so wrapped up in his perfect little family fantasy that he'd never suspect a thing. And by the time I'm ready to end things, I'll have played the devoted wife for so long that no one will question me getting half of everything." She leaned toward the camera, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm going to bleed him dry, Janet. Every penny I can legally get. After all these years of playing house, I deserve it." I paused the video, my hand shaking so badly I nearly knocked over my glass. The timestamp showed there were another 20 minutes left, but I couldn't bear to watch more. The woman on my screen was a stranger wearing my wife's face, a predator who had targeted me for a long con spanning decades of my life. 10 years, she'd said. 10 years from 2012 would be 2022. This year, our 25th anniversary. It hadn't been a spontaneous decision. Emma hadn't suddenly fallen out of love with me or found someone new. She'd been planning this for at least a decade, staying with me only to maximize what she could take when she finally left. A cold clarity washed over me, replacing the numbness of the past few days. I saved the video to multiple locations, making sure it couldn't be deleted or lost. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "Frank Winter's law office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Richard Matthews," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "I need to speak with Frank about a divorce case. Tell him it's urgent." As I ended the call, I looked back at the frozen image of Emma on my screen, her calculating smile, her cold eyes. The woman I'd loved for 25 years had been plotting my financial destruction for nearly half that time. "You wanted to turn the page, Emma," I murmured, closing the laptop. "But you forgot that every story has two sides." 3 days after discovering the video, I sat in Frank Winter's office, my hands clasped tightly on my lap to keep them from shaking. "This changes everything," Frank said, removing his reading glasses after watching the video for the second time. "Premeditated fraud, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. The court won't look kindly on this." "So what's our next step?" I asked, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the storm raging inside me. "We confront her with the evidence," Frank replied, "but on our terms, not hers." That evening I texted Emma, "We need to discuss the divorce arrangements. Come to the house tomorrow at 7 p.m. Her reply came quickly. "My lawyer advised no private meetings. We'll do this legally." I responded simply, "Your choice, but you might want to see what I found on the old hard drive first." After that, silence. But I knew she would come. The next day, at exactly 7 p.m., Emma's BMW pulled into our driveway. She wasn't alone. Our son Thomas and daughter Elizabeth were with her. I should have expected this. Emma had always been strategic, and bringing our children was her shield. "Dad?" Thomas looked concerned as they entered. At 28, he had my height and Emma's sharp features. "Mom said you're not handling the separation well. We wanted to be here to support both of you." Elizabeth, 25, gave me a quick, awkward hug. "She's worried about you, Dad." "We all are." I looked at Emma, standing slightly behind them, with a practiced expression of concern on her face. She thought she'd won this round by bringing the kids as emotional leverage. "I'm glad you're all here," I said, leading them to the living room where my laptop was set up, connected to the TV. "There's something you all need to see." "Richard," Emma warned, a flicker of unease crossing her face, "whatever you're about to do is show our children the truth," I finished, pressing play before she could object further. The video started playing on the large screen. Emma on our bed, speaking clearly about her affair with David, her plans to bleed me dry after waiting for the perfect financial moment, the calculating smile as she discussed her decade-long con. Thomas and Elizabeth froze, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to horror, as their mother's voice filled the room, clinical and cold as she dissected her marriage like a business transaction. "Turn it off." Emma lunged for the remote, but I moved it away. "No, Emma. You wanted to turn the page, remember? Let's make sure everyone understands what story we've been living in." When the video finally ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Thomas stood up first, his face ashen. "Mom, tell me this isn't real." Emma smoothed her dress, switching tactics with alarming speed. "It was a joke, obviously. Janet and I were just being silly." "A joke you planned for 10 years? Elizabeth's voice cracked. "You called Dad your retirement plan. You talked about bleeding him dry. What kind of joke is that?" "You're taking this out of context," Emma insisted, her voice hardening. "Richard is manipulating you, can't you see? He's edited this video to make me look bad, because he's bitter about our marriage ending." I said nothing, letting her words hang in the air. The more she talked, the more she revealed herself. "The timestamp shows this is from 2012, Thomas said quietly. "You've been planning to divorce Dad for a decade, while he was taking care of us, paying for our college, planning your anniversary surprises." Emma's face contorted with frustration. "You don't understand the sacrifices I made for this family. 25 years of my life." "Stop it." Elizabeth's voice was sharp. "Just stop lying. We watched you for 10 minutes talking about your affair and how you plan to take Dad's money. There's no context that makes that okay." Emma turned on me, her mask of concern replaced by cold fury. "You think this changes anything? A video from years ago won't hold up in court. It's your word against mine." "Actually," I said calmly, "Frank says it establishes intent to defraud. Combined with your financial records and the timing of your divorce filing, it's quite compelling evidence." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Emma's eyes. She turned to our children, reaching for Thomas's arm. "You can't believe him over me. I'm your mother." Thomas stepped back, his expression pained. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Elizabeth was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. How could you do this to Dad? To us? Emma's gaze darted between them, realizing she was losing her grip on the situation. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. She grabbed her purse, addressing me with cold precision. My lawyer will contact yours. He'll be waiting, I replied. The door slammed behind her with a finality that seemed to punctuate the end of 25 years of what I'd thought was my life. Thomas sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. How could you? I sat beside him, feeling the weight of everything we'd just lost. I didn't know either. Elizabeth moved to my other side, leaning her head on my shoulder the way she had as a child. What happens now? I put my arms around my children, the only true thing to come from my marriage. Now we start over. We turn the page, but the right way. 2 months after the confrontation, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment. The space was smaller than what I was used to, just a one-bedroom with an open kitchen and living area, but it was mine, completely mine. No traces of Emma, no memories lurking in corners, nothing that belonged to the life I'd thought I was living. The divorce proceedings had turned ugly, just as Frank had predicted. Emma denied everything, claimed the video was taken out of context, even suggested I had somehow manipulated the footage. But the evidence was too strong, her own words too clear. The judge had seen through her act. When the preliminary ruling came down denying her claim to half my retirement fund and awarding me the house, Emma had been stunned. Her carefully constructed plan, a decade in the making, was crumbling before her eyes. She'd assumed her performance as the dutiful wife would be enough, never imagining I'd uncover evidence of her true intentions. Of course, I didn't want the house. Too many ghosts. I sold it and split the proceeds with her, not because I had to, but because I wanted this chapter closed. The divorce wasn't final yet, but the worst was over. I was starting to breathe again. The first week in my new place was the hardest. The silence felt oppressive, the empty walls accusatory. For 25 years, I'd been half of a whole. Now I was just me. Richard Matthews, 55 years old, starting over. Dad, you there? Thomas's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He was carrying the last box from his car. Sorry, just thinking. I took the box from him and set it on the kitchen counter. Thanks for helping with the move. Thomas looked around the apartment, his expression thoughtful. It's a good space. Needs some life, though. I'll get there, I promised, though I wasn't sure how. Decorating had always been Emma's domain. Now I had to figure out my own taste, my own style. Elizabeth wants to know if you're coming to dinner Friday, Thomas said, leaning against the counter. She's worried about you being alone too much. I smiled, touched by my children's concern. They'd been my anchors through all of this, steady and supportive despite their own pain and confusion. Tell her I'll be there. But I'm fine, really. Thomas gave me a look that said he wasn't convinced. Have you thought about what you're going to do now? Besides work, I mean. I hadn't, not really. Work had been my refuge, the one area of my life untouched by Emma's betrayal. My job as an architectural consultant kept me busy during the day, but the evenings stretched out endlessly. I might take up photography again, I said, surprising myself with the answer. Photography had been my passion in college, before marriage, career, and children had filled my time. Emma had always dismissed it as a hobby, nothing serious. Thomas's face brightened. Really? That's great, Dad. You used to take amazing pictures when we were kids. You remember that? I was genuinely surprised. I'd stopped carrying my camera everywhere when the children were teenagers, convinced they found it embarrassing. Of course. You had that old Nikon, right? You used to drive Mum crazy, stopping to take pictures on every vacation. A memory surfaced, Emma rolling her eyes as I crouched to capture the perfect angle of a sunset in Maui, telling me to hurry up. The restaurant wouldn't hold our reservation. Had she already been with David by then? Had those vacations just been part of her long con? I pushed the thought away. I think I'd like to try it again. Maybe take a class or something. There's a photography studio downtown that offers workshops, Thomas suggested. Elizabeth's friend Mia works there. I could get the information for you. The idea sent an unexpected thrill through me. That would be great. After Thomas left, I unpacked the box he'd brought in. Books, mostly. As I arranged them on the empty shelves, I found something tucked between two volumes. My old moleskin notebook where I used to sketch composition ideas for photographs. I'd forgotten I even had it. I sat on my new couch and flipped through the pages, rediscovering a part of myself I'd set aside long ago. Sketches, notes about lighting, lists of locations I'd wanted to visit, dreams I'd put on hold when real life took over. On the last used page, a quote I'd scribbled years ago caught my eye. Sometimes the hardest part is starting over, but it's also the most beautiful. The next morning, I did something impulsive. Before heading to work, I drove downtown and walked into Lightbox Studios. A young woman with bright blue hair looked up from the reception desk. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to sign up for a photography class," I said, the words feeling strange, but right. "I'm starting over." She smiled and handed me a brochure. "We've got a beginner's workshop starting next week." "Actually," I said, looking at the advanced classes listed, "I think I'm picking up where I left off." That evening, I hung my first photograph in the new apartment. Not a family picture, but one I'd taken years ago of a solitary tree weathering a storm. It seemed appropriate somehow. Looking at it on my wall, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Found an old album Mom missed when she was deleting everything. Lots of shots of us as kids. Want me to bring it Friday?" I typed back, "Absolutely. Maybe I'll digitize them. Starting a new collection." As I set the phone down, I realized I was smiling. Emma had tried to erase our past, but she'd only succeeded in giving me a blank canvas for my future. 6 months into my new life, I was no longer counting the days since the separation. The rhythms of my new routine had become familiar. Work during the week, photography classes on Thursdays, dinner with Thomas or Elizabeth most weekends. I had started dating again, tentatively. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with women I met through friends or my photography workshop. I wasn't ready for more, but it felt good to remember that I could still connect with someone, still laugh, still find things to talk about beyond my failed marriage. The divorce was nearly finalized. Emma had fought every step of the way, but the evidence was irrefutable. Her attempts to claim half my retirement fund and the proceeds from the house sale had been denied. In the end, she would receive a settlement far smaller than she'd planned for all those years, enough to live on, but not the windfall she'd expected. I was in my darkroom, a converted closet in my apartment, when my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Dad, need to talk. Can I come over tonight?" Something in the terseness of the message concerned me. "Of course, everything okay, just need to show you something." 7, okay? I agreed, trying not to worry. At 30, Thomas had his own life, his own problems. Maybe it was work stress or relationship troubles, but a nagging feeling followed me through the rest of the afternoon as I finished developing my latest series of photographs. Thomas arrived precisely at 7, a manila envelope clutched in his hand. His face was drawn, and he declined my offer of a beer. "Dad, I need to show you something, but I don't know if I should." He placed the envelope on my coffee table, not releasing it. "I found some things when I was helping Mom move out of David's place." This was the first I'd heard of Emma moving. "They broke up." Thomas nodded grimly. 3 months ago, she's been staying in a condo David owns while looking for her own place. He hesitated. "I shouldn't be helping her after what she did, but she's still your mother," I finished for him. "I understand." Thomas sighed, finally releasing the envelope. She had a box of old papers. I found these while helping her sort through them. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents, bank statements mostly. As I flipped through them, a pattern emerged. Regular transfers from an account I didn't recognize into Emma's personal account, dating back to 2010. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though the sinking feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. "That account number belonged to David's hedge fund," Thomas said quietly. "Mom was getting regular payments from him for years." I stared at the statements, the dates jumping out at me. The first transfer was made 1 month after I'd landed a major client that had doubled my income. Each subsequent transfer coincided with financial milestones in our marriage. My promotion, our mortgage refinancing, increases in my retirement contributions. She was reporting on our finances to him, I said slowly. All those questions about our investments, our savings. She was feeding him information. Thomas looked miserable. There's more. He pulled out another document from the envelope, a prenuptial agreement between Emma and David, dated just 3 months ago. They were planning to get married as soon as your divorce was final. But look at paragraph 12. I scanned the legal jargon until I found what Thomas was pointing to, a clause specifying that any funds received by Emma from her divorce from Richard Matthews would be considered separate property, not subject to division in the event of her divorce from David. He was protecting himself, I said, a bitter laugh escaping me, making sure she couldn't do to him what she did to me. But that's not the worst part, Thomas said, his voice strained. Keep reading. The next paragraph detailed Emma's financial obligations to David. She would be required to reimburse him for the investment he had made in her over the years, the total amount of all those transfers, plus interest. She wasn't just having an affair, I said, the full picture finally becoming clear. She was his investment. He was funding her, supporting her, while she stayed with me until the optimum moment to divorce me and take half of everything. Then she'd pay him back with interest and they'd both profit. Thomas nodded, his expression grim. I confronted her about it. She didn't even deny it. She said I wouldn't understand what it was like to be trapped in a boring marriage, that she and David had a business arrangement that benefited them both. The coldness of it all struck me like a physical blow. 25 years of my life had been nothing but a long-term investment strategy for Emma and her lover. Every anniversary gift, every family vacation, every moment I'd cherished had been part of their calculation. Why did they break up? I asked, curious despite myself. The video changed everything. Once he knew she wouldn't get the settlement they'd planned for, David cut her loose. Their arrangement wasn't profitable anymore. Thomas's voice was bitter. And now she's alone, with no one but her children, who can barely look at her, and a settlement that's a fraction of what she expected. I set the documents down, suddenly weary. Why show me this, Thomas? The divorce is almost final. This doesn't change anything legally. Thomas met my eyes, his own shining with unshed tears. Because I needed you to know it was never about you. Nothing you did or didn't do would have changed this. She and David had this planned from the beginning. For the first time since discovering Emma's betrayal, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I hadn't failed as a husband. I hadn't been blind or stupid. I'd been targeted, selected as a viable mark in a long con. Thank you, I said quietly, reaching out to squeeze my son's hand, for telling me the truth. As Thomas left that night, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. Emma had lost everything she'd schemed for, but I had gained something unexpected, freedom from self-doubt. 1 year to the day after Emma deleted our family photos, I stood in the gallery surrounded by my own images. 40 photographs lined the walls, each telling a story of rebirth and rediscovery. I'd titled the exhibition Turning Pages, my private joke, my reclamation of Emma's parting words. The small gallery buzzed with conversation, friends I'd reconnected with, colleagues who'd supported me through the divorce, and new acquaintances from my photography world mingled among the images. Thomas and Elizabeth moved through the crowd, pride evident in their faces as they pointed out their favorite photographs to guests. "You must be very pleased," said a voice beside me. Mia, the photography instructor, who had encouraged me to pursue this exhibition, smiled warmly. "They're selling remarkably well." I nodded, still somewhat in disbelief that people wanted to hang my art in their homes. It feels surreal. A year ago, I could barely imagine getting out of bed, let alone having my own exhibition. "That's the power of starting over," Mia said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. At 42, she was younger than me, but there was a wisdom about her that transcended age. Our friendship had evolved slowly over the past year, from teacher and student to colleagues, to something that felt increasingly like more. We'd been careful, both carrying our own scars, but tonight felt like a threshold of some kind. "Have you seen the visitor book?" she asked, guiding me to a small table near the entrance. "People are leaving the most amazing comments." I flipped through the pages, reading the notes from strangers who had connected with my work. One in particular caught my eye. "Your images of rebirth gave me hope during my own divorce. Thank you for sharing your journey." A lump formed in my throat. When I'd started taking photographs again, it had been purely selfish, my therapy, my escape. I'd never imagined my journey could touch others. The gallery door opened, and I looked up instinctively. My heart stuttered when I recognized the woman entering, Emma. She was alone, dressed simply in black, her once perfect appearance somewhat diminished. She hesitated at the threshold, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. For a moment I was paralyzed, unsure how to react. We hadn't spoken since the divorce was finalized 6 months ago. The settlement had been fair, but far from what she'd schemed for all those years. Last I'd heard through Thomas, she was working as an office manager at a small law firm. A steep step down from her executive position that she'd lost when her affair with David became public. Mia squeezed my hand supportively. "Is that—" "My ex-wife," I confirmed quietly. "I should see what she wants." I crossed the room, aware of Thomas and Elizabeth noticing Emma's arrival, their expressions turning guarded. When I reached her, I was struck by how much smaller she seemed, no longer the towering figure who had dominated my life for so many years. "Richard," she said, her voice lacking its old confidence, "your exhibition looks wonderful." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the genuine tone in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." She glanced around, uncomfortable under the curious stares of those who knew our story. "Thomas mentioned it. I hope it's okay that I came." The old Richard would have been eager to smooth things over, to make her comfortable at the expense of his own feelings, but I wasn't that man anymore. "What do you want, Emma?" I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands, twisting a plain silver ring that had replaced her diamond wedding band. "I wanted to see who you've become," she admitted, "and maybe to understand what I threw away. A year ago, those words might have moved me. Now they were just words from a stranger who had once shared my life." "I hope you found what you were looking for," I said, not unkindly, but without offering more. Emma's gaze drifted to where Mia stood talking with Thomas and Elizabeth, the three of them forming a protective circle that didn't include her. "Are you happy, Richard?" The question surprised me with its simplicity. I considered it honestly before answering. "Yes," I said finally, "I am." She nodded, a flicker of genuine regret crossing her face. "I'm glad. You deserve it." She reached into her purse and handed me a small USB drive. "I found some old family videos when I was moving. They should be with you." I accepted it with a nod, not trusting myself to speak. This small act of decency seemed too little, too late, but it was something. "Goodbye, Richard," she said softly, then turned and left as quietly as she had arrived. I rejoined my family and Mia, the USB drive a small weight in my pocket. "What did she want?" Elizabeth asked, her expression concerned. "To see the exhibition," I said simply, "and to return some family videos." Thomas looked surprised. "That's unexpectedly decent of her." I shrugged. "People change, sometimes even when they don't want to." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. As the crowd thinned, Elizabeth approached me with a gift-wrapped package. "Thomas and I wanted to give you something to mark the occasion," she said, pressing it into my hands. Inside was a leather-bound album. I opened it to find new prints of the family photos Emma had deleted, Thomas and Elizabeth as children, holidays, graduations, moments I'd thought were lost forever. "How did you—" "We had copies," Thomas explained. "Elizabeth and I both kept backups of the family photos on our own computers. Mum didn't know." Tears pricked at my eyes as I turned the pages, rediscovering these treasured moments. "This is incredible. Thank you both." "We wanted you to know that she couldn't erase our family, Dad," Elizabeth said, her voice thick with emotion. "What we had was real, even if her part in it wasn't." I pulled my children close, overwhelmed with gratitude for these two remarkable adults who had weathered this storm alongside me, emerging stronger and wiser. Later, as I locked up the gallery with Mia, she nodded toward the album under my arm. "Family photos." "The ones Emma deleted," I explained. The kids saved them. She smiled, understanding the significance. So you got your past back? Parts of it, I agreed. The parts worth keeping. We stood on the sidewalk in the cool evening air, the gallery lights dimming behind us. Would you like to get dinner? I asked, the question carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Mia's smile was warm, inviting. I'd like that very much. As we walked together down the lamp-lit street, I realized that Emma had been right about one thing. It had been time to turn the page. But the story that followed wasn't the one she had imagined. It was better, richer, more authentic, and most importantly, it was mine to write.